Following the release of the most recent quarterly GDP growth figures last week, one of the most prominent voices of concern in the economy was that of BJP Rajya Sabha MP Dr. Subramanian Swamy, who wrote on Twitter, and I quote, "Get ready, say goodbye to the rupees 3 trillion economy if no economic policy is forthcoming. Neither boldness alone or knowledge alone can save the economy from a crash. It needs both. Today, we have neither." Dr. Swamy joins us now to talk more about what he's concerned about, the direction that India's economy is going in. Dr. Swamy, let me start by understanding what sentiment post made you put that post a few days back.
Well, first of all, I've been warning since 2015 in op-eds in newspapers like Hindu and Pioneer and so on, that we are now beginning to get onto a tailspin, and by 2019 we will be in a serious difficulty, and that's exactly what has happened. So it's not something that suddenly happened. Second is practically every indicator by own statistics of the government is negative, whether you take agriculture, you take manufacturing, you take the core sectors, practically everything except that those rising are unemployment and some sector prices. These are the things, it's all negative. And the growth rate has dropped continuously since 2015, and it's now running at 5% per year. I don't know whether that's in current prices or constant prices because it has not been disclosed. I assume it is in constant prices, which means it should be closer to 4%. So all these, put you further and further away on the targets. For example, $5 trillion at 2019 prices in 2024 would mean a growth rate of now, under present, the latest indicators, it will mean a growth rate of 18% per year. Now, where are we? Less than 5%, and where is 18%? It's almost impossible. Now, if you say it's in current prices, that would be ridiculous. No economist worth his salt will talk in terms of current prices. So I think that's why I said say goodbye to $5 trillion.
Okay. For the month back, Dr. Swamy, and I want to read out one more tweet that you put out at the start of August. And in that, you laid out themes that for many years you've put forth. We've had previous conversations with you on how to go forward on some of those. I just want to read those out, and I want to take further some of that.
Yes.
In early August, you'd said abolish personal income tax, bring to parity
yes.
the prime lending rate and the deposit rate at about 9%, making tax deductible yes. education spends and R&D,
that's right.
and the need to print notes for infrastructure spending. You've laid those out. I want to ask somewhat
yes.
of a political question. I want to understand the distance between what you've laid out and the policies that the government chosen to adopt. How do you bridge those?
I don't think there's any policy of the government, so how can I measure the distance? What is the policy? Consolidating banks, is that a policy? I mean, your mind should be focused on the parameters of the economy, not in all these bureaucratic hassles of deciding which branch of a bank has to be closed down because you're merging 2 or 3 or 4 banks together. I think the singular lack of a comprehensive statement of economic policy it doesn't exist with our present government. It didn't exist with Mr. Jaitley either. So this has been, I think, we have done extremely well on the other non-economic front, and that's why we got such a huge mandate. We have done much better than we did in the first 2-3 years in corruption, fighting corruption. We have fired up the imagination of our people by removing Article 370 and the earlier Balakot bombing, as well as the surgical strike. Then the Prime Minister's micro projects like Ujjwala, cylinder gas, bathrooms, toilets for women, all these have made a huge impact on the public that the Prime Minister means well. But that's not macroeconomics. In macroeconomics, we are on a tailspin heading for a crash.
All right, I want to come to some of those non-economic issues in just a bit. But as you said, the need for a grand plan for the macroeconomy. If you remember, in the build-up to the previous election, in 2013 and 14, the incoming then Prime Minister met a whole set of people to bring in big ideas to take India's economy to the next stage as he seemed fit. Somewhere down the road, concerns about the popularity of some of those measures, factor market reforms came in and perhaps the government changed course. What went wrong in those early years?
Well, all the advisors they got, they're only in name economists. Raghuram Rajan is actually a management specialist, and he doesn't know anything about macroeconomics. And finance is essentially a bilateral matter. And similarly, Arvind Subramanian, he specialized in these drug companies' work, and he appeared for them before the U.S. Congress committees. He also wrote an op-ed in Business Standard in 2013 that Modi is all bogus, and all this talk of Gujarat miracle is all nonsense. That kind of person we appointed. I mean, I think we have made very bad choices on advisors. We need people who know macroeconomics well, and that too with a great deal of quantitative experience, preferably mathematical. And we have plenty of people, but we have bypassed them and brought these chaps from abroad. There was another guy from Colombia. He had no clue at all. And then finally he buzzed off back to Colombia.
Okay. Would it be fair to say, Dr. Swamy, that this is perhaps the strongest PMO this country has seen in the last 40 years? Given that, be those appointments, specific people in specific roles, be that the RBI governor, the chief economic advisor, ministers, much of the mandate for policy comes from the Prime Minister's office. What needs to change in that mindset in that office?
That's for the Prime Minister to decide. What can I say? He should get somebody who knows economics as who's got a degree in economics, and he's published a lot of papers which can be scrutinized. But he won't know what a good economist is and what a bad economist is. And that's why he has relied on other people's advice, and he's hired them. And in the case of Raghuram Rajan, I had to really run a battle before he could send him back. Of course, I must say his instincts are good. When I have stepped up the pressure, he has had a close look. Both Arvind Subramanian and Raghuram Rajan were sent back. So the real problem is that there was somebody who knows both macroeconomics and knows India and has some public confidence. You have a person who has no confidence, who doesn't know anything about Indian politics, how it works, then of course you are going to have problems, and that's what you have had.
Will you make then such a representation yet again directly to the Prime Minister, given your concerns on the economy? And how would you put it to him in political terms?
Well, I can say only one thing, that I have been doing that earlier, but he is not in a position to evaluate what I'm saying. And to the people he sends it to, they are all bureaucratic types. They don't want any outside advice. All economists think that they know what they want, but I would say I don't need to do it because I have other things to do. I am fighting corruption. I am fighting to see that Ram Temple is built. So I got a lot of things to do. So there's no, I'm not hankering after anything that he must consult me. But certainly I have a track record. I'm a joint author with Paul Samuelson and a student of Simon Kuznets. These are Nobel laureates who are comparable to Einstein in physics. And so I feel sad that we had such a mandate and we just thrown it away.
Is India's previous Prime Minister somebody you consider with adequate economic know-how, and the statement he made in the last 3 days, would you add and believe that what he said there and laid out there is credible?
Well, both Chandrasekhar and of course I was ministers with both, and Narasimha Rao. Narasimha Rao was a very learned man, and if you even even though he was not an economist, but if you explained to him, he immediately grasped it. Chandrasekhar decentralized it. He delegated the entire authority to me, and that's how we made so much progress in the first 5 years of 1990s.
Sorry, my reference, sir, was to the recent statement made by Dr. Manmohan Singh, and how I wanted to shape that question was whether, as those in the highest offices in this country needing to understand the way the dynamics of the economy works, do you consider his economic credentials credible, and his statement recently that needs to be taken seriously?
Well, Manmohan Singh, you see, when he was finance minister of Mr. Narasimha Rao, he did wonderfully well. But why, as prime minister, he did nothing? I mean, take, for instance, the last year, 2013-14, what was the GDP growth rate? It was to 4.8%, according to them. And in my opinion, it was much less, but because they had changed the base. But the fact of the matter is that Manmohan Singh is a very good economist, and he's well qualified. He has done research, but he doesn't have the nerve to tell the political authority that this is the way to do it. In the case of Narasimha Rao, he gave him a free hand because I was first hand. I know it because the blueprints came from me. I had prepared it for Chandrasekhar, but the government had fallen. And as the biographies of the Narasimha Rao now point out, Narasimha Rao, first thing he did upon taking oath was come to my house and take away all those blueprints, and then ask me to take a cabinet level appointment in his government. So that kind of person Manmohan Singh can work on. But under Sonia Gandhi's thing, he was just a rubber stamp.
All right. I want to come to the impact a consistently weak economy could have. In your first answer, you laid out some of the non-economic reasons that and factors and moves that this government made in its first term that have been popular with the people, that allowed. Some of them are completely non-economic, some of them are micro measures that have changed how people experience their touch with the government.
Yes.
Given and if this continues for a while, does the political capital that the Prime Minister has been able to build up as a result of those non-economic moves and some of those microeconomic moves, will that wane? Will there come a time when the fact that a weak economy for a while has not affected his popularity so far will do so?
Oh, certainly. With this unemployment, now you go to any automobile store, they have started retrenching. Nobody is recruiting more employment. The unemployment is growing, and that's going to be a factor. The agricultural sector is in a bad way. And of course, the small and medium industries are suffering because of these high interest rates. Banks are tottering. NBFC can anytime collapse. I think that will have a huge impact. It's like 1967 when Mrs. Gandhi, the Congress Party, took a very, very hard beating because of the crisis in agriculture, which had an effect in industry too. So yes, I think he's got about a year more to go on his, that he's a good man. He's a man who's interested in the country, for the poor and all that. But if it doesn't rectify, I don't think he even has a year. I think till next March is all he has. After that, you will see street level demonstrations, people getting bold to challenge him, that sort of thing.
Back in an interview you did in February, Dr. Swamy, with BloombergQuint, ahead of that election, you said it's not economics, it's issues like the Ayodhya temple, 370, triple talaq that wins elections.
Yes.
Will there come a point where emotive issues will continue to mask the need for policymakers to think that they need to address the economy?
See, some of the things that need to be done non-economic fronts are also dependent on the economy. For example, supposing we were to take POK back, the kind of investment, the kind of economy we need would be much better, has to be much better than this, because you have to have backup support for the army and the Air Force, the fuel, so many other things. And there may be sanctions, you have to overcome those sanctions. So I think whatever we could do without worrying about the economy is almost over. And Ram Mandir is also going to be over because the Supreme Court is going to give a decision. And the way things are going, it looks pretty good. So the question will now become, what is the other thing you can do? You can take Article 370 has already been quashed. Now the only thing will be to recover the Kashmir. That would be the major thing in terms of emotive action. And that would require a great deal of economic backup. And therefore we won't be able to do that either. And on corruption, you see, yes?
Sorry, no, go on.
Corruption, the law processes are such that on corruption, people, you know, the law processes are such that it takes time, and people, there's the counter propaganda is very severe, nothing is going to happen, they're all the same, the judges are bought, politicians are bought, you know, all this kind of thing could dishearten them. But if they were going to lose jobs, then that will become number one. I mean, you can have your wage rates not go up fast enough, people can suffer it and say, good, it's good for the country that we support it now, so on. But if you're going to be out of a job and you know, you find it hard to feed your children, then of course it's going to be it's going to hit hard.
Is there, and again a slightly political point that perhaps the current Home Minister and the party president might want to pay attention to, the fact that Mr. Modi's popularity has stayed intact over a 5.5–6 year period from before the election. Meanwhile, the BJPs found it slightly tougher to get re-elected with equal mandates at the state level. Gujarat was tougher than it was the previous time round. 3 state elections were lost last December. Are India's voters holding to account their state governments for delivering economic goodwill and prosperity, and perhaps implementation of the policies that Mr. Modi may or may not lay out? So is there a fear within the party that there might be state election losses that could come if this continues for a while in the economic slowdown?
Well, that partly also depends on what the opposition looks like, you see. If the opposition looks like, you know, they are siding with Pakistan, they are all divided amongst themselves, a whole lot of corruption is coming out, then people may still say, okay, let this state elections go by and we'll see later on. We always got the Lok Sabha elections later on. I think it's not so clear that the effect will be felt in this coming state elections.
Dr. Swamy, this is a party that traditionally in its years of first phases of expansion was a party that was backed by the trading communities in pockets of urban areas in this country. Is there a fear that the BJP could lose parts of its old base that remain most aggrieved by the state of the economy right now?
I don't think so, because the traders are not supporting us because we are pro-trade. They are supporting us because they are basically very nationalistic people. The Hindu elements in that are very strongly Hindu. Then we have got now the Muslim women also rooting for us. The Shias are with us now. Boras, Khojas, you know, it's a complicated arithmetic. And I don't think that, I'm just telling you, if there's mass scale unemployment, there's collapse of institutions, you know, winding up of banks collapsing or that kind of thing, then it might alarm people. But I don't see that happening for another 6 months. It could happen after 6 months.
Was there a point perhaps around the time of January 2015 when the Soot Boot Sarkar jibe happened, that any possibility of a in economic sense, conservative government that believes in stepping back from overregulation and letting private enterprise happen, that this government pivoted to being a statist socialist government like those of the Congress party. And since then, perhaps some of that new economic direction has meant more of the same.
Yes, I say, I think India can only be driven, as we learned from Narasimha Rao's period and Chandrasekhar's period. When you allow people to do their thing, you incentivize. You give them incentives, people. Today, you abolish income tax, people dance in the streets and the gloom will go immediately, and then you build on it. Similarly, if you, even if you print notes and build highways and so on, that will have a huge impact, and those money that goes into their hands will actually raise demand, and so you can get the cycle moving. So these are things which can be done, but for some reason, I think this is Mr. Jaitley's influence. It's all just tax the super rich. Jaitley's close associate, Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman, is also talking the same language, taxing the super rich, chasing them with income tax, giving free hand to the income tax people to go and collect revenue. These are not going to work in India. The emergency is a benchmark for all of us. You can't force the Indian people. They may become silent, but they'll hit you when they get a chance.
No, but then even those measures not taken by the finance ministry, right? What you earlier alluded to, some of the micro measures. Is there political room for that, Dr. Swamy? Because the Prime Minister himself has rolled out a number of measures which essentially to the person means that the Sarkar or the government is the giver of that well-being to you, not the surroundings by themselves, that we perpetuate a system where the government is the giver. So is there room for any other economic thought?
No, you see, the issue is, as I told you, what hits the people most is unemployment, the inability to sell your product. These are things where agriculture is not able to get a good price, they're really affected. Now, what you're saying is, will these micro projects of the Prime Minister carry him through? Yes, it will carry him through if the opposition looks pathetic. They'll say, all right, give him another chance. There is still a great deal of faith in Mr. Narendra Modi, and I think he's also a very smart man. He can smell a thing. But he has to devote his attention now to the economy in a way which is meaningful. Just not getting some new people in the job, new ministers. That won't do. You have to see that the core problem is in the macroeconomic field. And you have to have somebody who has that kind of a knowledge of macroeconomics, that it's a multi-dimensional thing, it's a matrix. What you do in one sector has an effect on the whole economy. So you've got to trace all that. That requires a great deal of expertise and training in economics.
According to you, Dr. Swamy, then who are those people, or who's that person or people who need to be there with that thought to reboot the thinking that surrounds policy making in India?
Well, if I name somebody and then I don't name somebody else, that fellow will get upset with me. So I'm not going to name anybody. I am giving you what the qualifications are, and you go and find them.
All right. On that note, Dr. Subramanian Swamy, thank you very much for making time for BloombergQuint on the state of the economy and the policy decisions in the last 5-6 years that have led the economy to the current state. If you have been, thank you for watching.